Welcome to Series 3 of the Callisto Grand Big Change podcast. In this series, we explore and reveal the personal and professional sides of senior executives from large companies. Reaching the top in any field is never straightforward, requiring many years of personal investment and dedication. I'm Mark Harrison, founder of Callisto Grand. Over there in Hungary is my colleague Esther Gabrielle. And today it's our great pleasure to meet Jon Keating, the Vice President and General Manager of the EMEA region of HighRadius. HighRadius is a fintech enterprise, software as a service company, which leverages artificial intelligence-based autonomous systems to help companies automate accounts receivable and treasury processes. Good morning, Jon.
Good morning, Mark, and thank you for inviting me to join you today.
Delighted that you're here. To get started then, your biography on LinkedIn says starts with senior roles in 1998. But you graduated from Durham University in 1986. What did you study? And after graduation, what was your path to get into IT in the intervening 12 years?
Yes, so good question. So I went to Durham University, and I studied what was called general arts, which is a combined arts degree. And for me, that included three arts topics, which was Russian studies, anthropology, and ancient history.
Okay.
Which usually gets a smile and a few observations. And actually, the background to it is that when I was going to university, like a lot of people, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I left university. And I didn't particularly want to focus on one subject because there was no one subject that I was excited enough about to want to spend all my time on. So my criteria for university were probably a little bit unusual, which was I wanted to go to the highest ranking university that I could on the basis that hopefully that would serve me well in my career. And I wanted to go to university, which was one of the top rugby universities in the country. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate enough to get into Durham, which ticked both of those boxes. So that was actually the background to my university career.
Okay, all right. And do you think you were always destined to work in IT or fintech? And what was the appeal? When did that kind of come about?
Yeah, I know is the answer. And as I said, when by the time I left Durham, I'd done a number of different jobs, like most people had as students, and I realised that I enjoyed and was good at sales. And actually, I preferred doing sales jobs, sometimes commission only. In fact, one of my first jobs was selling carpet cleaning door-to-door commission only. And I wouldn't say I enjoyed it, but actually I found I enjoyed doing that more than, working in a pub, getting paid £2 an hour, watching the hours go by. So when I left Durham, I decided I wanted to go into sales, and I was going to go down the FMCG route. And I had an offer to join Procter & Gamble in their graduate sales scheme, and I'd accepted the offer, and then I got the joining instructions, and a big part of it was around new Pampers nappies and how they were twice as absorbent as the old ones, and I decided that just wasn't something that I could get excited about. So in fact, my decision to move into IT was at that point because I was looking around at different options, and I thought I could either go into the city, but I just didn't like the idea of working in the same place, same location for lots of years. And IT, of course, was emerging strongly as a newish sector and seemed exciting, seemed very meritocratic. And it was that point I decided I want to get into IT, and then it was a question of finding the right firm to join. And in fact, my first IT role was with a company called Memorex Telex, which is partly filling this gap. And my career over the next 8 to 10 years, I worked for two companies. One was Memorex Telex, and one was what used to be called MDIS, and then became Northgate Information Systems. And really my career was I started off selling small things for low value. So things which cost customers 10,000, 20,000, relatively simple hardware products. And when I was at Northgate Information Systems, we were selling solutions of $5, $10 million, complicated integration projects. Okay. So my journey was really about, I carried a bag, I had to hit it, and I moved from being a territory sales guy to a strategic sales guy, and then was promoted into a sales management role. I guess the irony was it was probably for all the wrong reasons, which I was the most successful salesperson. So the business unit manager at the time thought I'd make a good sales manager. So I'm not sure it was the right rationale, but actually that was really where my my management career started off.
So that was the genesis of it. And then, so at that time, we're still talking like in the 1980s, I guess, when you
1990 by now.
1990, right? Okay. But even so, we're still really, from my recollection, we're still right at the beginning of the IT revolution. We kind of moved now from handwritten records to floppy disk, punch cards. We're pre-internet, we're pre-email, really. Was that your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can still remember where the network was. You got up from your desk and took the floppy disk round to your secretary, who then typed up the RFP response. And sometimes it even involved either somebody in another office, if they were collaborating, faxing down a document that was then retyped into the RFP that we were replying to, and that was exciting.
Yes, yeah, it was. And can you imagine though that from that time, from the early 90s, that we'd be talking quite normally and matter of factly now about AI, predictive analytics, talking robots, chatbots?
Yeah, I sort of do wonder actually. Sometimes it would be interesting if they put on a load of Tomorrow's World repeats, if you remember Tomorrow's World.
Yeah.
And we actually look at what they were predicting. And it would be worth doing. I think the other thing that I've noticed, and you've probably noticed as well, is just the speed of change over the last 5 years has been greater than the last 25 years put together. So, sorry, go on.
No, I absolutely agree. And just before we started doing the recording, we were saying about just doing what we're doing now.
Yeah.
You're in the UK, I'm in the Czech Republic, Esther's in Hungary, and we're doing what we're doing, and we're not even really thinking about it. We don't question it anymore. Come along.
A couple of data points, which is extraordinary when you think about them, is that the iPad is only just 10 years old.
Yeah.
And Facebook is only 15 years old. And you think how ubiquitous they both are in our lives today, and they've existed for such a short period of time.
Yeah, absolutely right. Although for all the advancement of technology, there are some things I think that have remained constant, and I'd like to talk about those for a little bit now. Like your references emphasize strong people management and business strategy skills. Did you have mentors that influenced you, and if so, how?
So I think throughout my career, I think I've had good learning opportunities, and some of them have come from coaches and mentors. And I think also at other times, you also learn things from observing behaviors that aren't very good. And you think, I wouldn't do that. And I think they all contribute to your development. I can think of a couple of particular examples. There was a guy I used to work for, and actually it was my first startup back sort of early 2000s, and I was working for a guy called Dave Koch. And Dave had a number of senior positions at EMC. And Dave was the European MD for this particular company. And I still have it in my head. I still use this with everybody who works for me, which is he had this saying, which is, he said, actually, when it comes to looking for performance, what I look for is 4 things. It's do what you say you're going to do it where you say you're going to do it, be on time, and say please and thank you. And at the time, it seems very trite and trivial, but actually, I realized that over time, everybody who I value as a high performer does those 4 things. You can rely on them. They're courteous, they're respectful, they treat everybody the same. And that stayed with me, over 20 years as, I guess, a core belief of mine that trying to perform to those values. It's
integrity, really, isn't it? What you're saying there, I think it's just personal integrity.
From treating a receptionist the same as the CEO.
Yeah,
it's all the little bits that go with some of those quite simple terminologies.
I totally agree with that. And are you conscious of how you motivate your teams, or does it just kind of stem from what you just said?
I think it starts with believing in what you do. And I think to get excited, be passionate about something, then people need to believe that what they're doing makes a difference. And so, some of it is about me, some of it is about what we as High Radius do. And I think we believe we make a difference to our customers, particularly in these times, on something that's very important to them. And I think for employees, that motivation starts with, firstly, that we're doing something that makes a difference. Secondly, that we're committed to making it successful for customers. It's not just words, so we walk the talk. And then below that, I guess my management beliefs are, one is those four things I said, but also it's about making sure expectations are clear, giving people space to develop themselves, but give them coaching, feedback, guidance regularly along the way to help them develop and grow. And then the final part to it is, it should be fun. And it's important that we then recognize people for their outstanding contributions. And also that, we spend a lot of time at work, we work hard, that along the way, we should be having some fun as well. So even in these times, one of our core values at High Radius is bring the zing. And, we really try and ensure even in these times that we're still finding ways to try and have some fun.
Bring the zing.
And I think that's the flow. Bring
the zing, you said, yeah?
Bring the zing.
I like that. And it comes through. It comes through that you're doing what you love. Would you say that you've ever had a negative impact on somebody, and what did you learn from that?
I suspect I've had negative impact on people many, many times, probably more times than I even know. I think I could give you specific examples actually, and we talked about mentors earlier on. And one of the other people I learned a lot from was a guy called Todd Musselman, who's a US, lives in Colorado. And Todd did a lot of leadership coaching for us when we were at Talia for the executive team. And he made a huge impact in terms of, I thought I was a good manager in terms of rethinking. And one of the concepts that Todd has is that there is no such thing as the truth. And there's facts, which are indisputable. And then the concept of the truth is that actually largely when we talk the truth, we're talking opinions. And people come to meetings, and I used to do this regularly, thinking I had the truth and that my truth was more valid than somebody else's truth. And I would regularly come to a meeting effectively with a biased mindset because I thought I had the truth. And of course that meant that I wasn't receptive to other people's ideas. I wasn't open-minded as I could have been. And that simple concept, learning from Todd, has really helped me over the last few years rethink some of my interactions with people and be much more open in how I engage with people, how I listen, because it's helped me recognize that actually it's often just my opinion. And my opinion's no more right than your opinion or Esther's opinion. It's just my opinion.
I think
that's really helpful.
And that's a fascinating point in it, because I think that's something I think we all learn as managers, is that what you say, you think it can only be received in one way.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. If you've got 10 people in a room, 10 people will have 10 interpretations of what you're saying, and all slightly different. Yeah. And as you say, so that truth is all things to all people, isn't it?
Yeah. And so in terms of, have I had a negative impact? Well, I can tell you for sure, particularly early in my career, I would have come to meetings certain I had the truth and that everybody else was clearly an idiot or didn't have my experience. And
the exuberance of youth.
I'm much more thoughtful about, and it's really helped me get to good conclusions, because if you approach it from the, hang on, this person has another perspective based on their experience, which is different to mine, their position in the company, then it really helps you think about, okay, so how do we get to alignment? So I've learned a lot, and I'm sure I've had lots of negative impacts, not always deliberately. I think the other thing sometimes is that we I've become much better. So I played a lot of sport, as I sort of touched on earlier on when I was younger. And I think you end up with a sort of mentality, a winning mentality that, well, in some ways, but it can also mean that you want to win the argument and you want everybody to know you won the argument.
Yeah.
And you congratulate yourself for feeling you've won the argument. Whereas, in fact, if you look further ahead, it's about the outcome ultimately and how you're going to work with these people in the future and work collaboratively together. And there's better ways to get to an ultimate successful outcome than winning an argument.
Yeah, and taking your rugby analogy, is kind of winning that one game, but not necessarily winning the league, is it? Or something like that. Yeah, it's just that moment in time. Yeah.
And I'm sure we've all done it. You know, somebody sends an email that you think's ridiculous, stupid, they don't understand, and we fire something off back in retaliation. And what does it actually achieve? You know, it just puts people's backs up. You don't get the conclusion you want. So over the years, I've become much better at thinking, okay, what's the outcome I want from this, and what's the best way to get to a successful outcome?
It is the kind of people management thing is very complex, and it isn't just one thing, is it? It's often it's a compromise and so on.
I would say the biggest factor is, you know, always be willing to keep learning. And I think you know, the biggest challenges you have, I find management-wise, with people who think they don't need to learn, they know it all. And you know, what I've realised is, you know, I thought I was a great manager when I was 35, and now when I look back, I realise how poor I was compared with today. And I think over time, you know, you try and keep accumulating tools in your toolbox, so that when you're faced with a particular situation, you have more tools to actually address that particular situation. And I think that's a big factor. It
is, and I think taking on board what we've learned this year, I mean, if we go back 12 months, we wouldn't have predicted where we are. And the message behind you, farewell 2020, I certainly endorse that, yes. And the sooner the better. So continuing on that then, what kind of challenges do you face as a company executive, especially in these turbulent times of 2020? And I think it's probably going to be even more turbulent in 2021.
Touch on, you know, we're fortunate that the business we're in, you know, what we do is help companies better manage their cash in very simple terms. And that actually is more of a priority for our customers and all companies today than it was 12 months ago. And that is at many points in the order to cash process. So even the companies who are doing very well, and there are some, still have concerns about, for example, how they're handling the credit process and how much bad debt they might be allowing themselves to be impacted by. So, you know, what we're being fortunate enough to see is that actually our business has continued to be very strong, and we're seeing increased interest from lots of companies for whom cash management is now more important and who want to talk to iRadius. So again, you know, we all read every day, you know, how difficult it is in many areas. We're fortunate enough that our business has been growing at over 70% compound annual growth for the last 5 years, and that will continue this year, and we are confident into next year. So actually our challenge is that, you know, our plan, for example, for our business here in Europe is that we'll be doubling the size of the business next year, including the number of and that will include opening up new offices in new countries. So our biggest challenge actually is, how do we make sure we can continue the growth? How can we hire enough quality people across all functions to ensure that we can continue the growth and also continue to deliver customers outstanding service? Because obviously that is critical. It's no good just winning new customers. We have to win them and then make sure that actually we've successfully met their expectations in terms of the value that they were expecting to get from our solutions. That's
the real sign of success, and it's not necessarily getting the signature on the paper. It's what comes in the next couple of years through implementation and beyond, isn't it? That's the critical part. Yeah.
I mean, it starts at the front end. You know, how do you hire salespeople who can understand quickly enough what it is our solutions do for our customers? It's How do we hire particularly people in our consulting team? How do we train them quickly enough in our solutions so that they can be credible with customers and knowledgeable and share that knowledge? So I think as a company at the moment, we see a huge opportunity, and that's our biggest challenge, definitely for me here in Europe.
So taking all that on board, and like most of us, you're probably working long hours every day. How do you take care of your physical and mental health? I mean, do you have a personal routine or something that you practice on a regular basis?
Yeah, probably not as well as I should. So I usually get up at 6 o'clock and walk the dog every morning. So that's my first routine, which gets me out, gets me a bit of fresh air. And then I try and work out, probably 4 mornings a week. Once I come back, I try and work out for an hour or so. And that at the moment is just about balancing the increased consumption of food and alcohol during COVID and lockdown. And then the other thing is actually I also started doing yoga actually about 3 or 4 months ago, which is the first time I tried it, mainly because I was just being so inflexible. And I've really enjoyed that, both in terms of it's very relaxing, and I found it significantly improved my flexibility and also my breathing. I didn't realize there was so much to breathing, but that's a different topic.
And that's probably a nice segue into my next question then, when you're saying about breathing. My next question is, at the end of the day, how do you blow off steam? And there was no pun intended there at all. So it just felt very nicely.
Yeah, so actually, I would say the primary ways. I have other different groups of friends that I guess I've sort of accumulated over the years. Most of them, one way or another, tend to be associated around rugby. And what I like about mixing with those groups of friends is that they don't really care very much about what I do for work.
Yeah,
so when we get together, we don't talk about work. They're not really interested. Well, they're definitely not interested in order to cash and automation. So it means we just talk about a whole bunch of other things. And I find that's a good way to decompress and, hopefully not too far in the future, I guess my ideal weekend would be a weekend away with a group of friends in Paris or Dublin watching England play rugby.
I was gonna ask you, just to deviate slightly from my questions and on the rugby theme. Do you still play, or do you just kind of follow?
No, my body is way beyond playing rugby.
So now you tend to watch and go to the games and so on, yeah?
Yeah, and then obviously try and keep fit by either means along the way.
But there's no better experience than watching a rugby game, is there? Really?
Absolutely. I think the whole week, the sociability of a weekend away, with a bunch of close friends, a foreign city, having fun, watching the rugby, I think that's probably my ideal weekend.
I go along with that. I've managed to see a few games myself over the years, and I think the whole rugby experience is it's hard to describe unless you've actually kind of experienced it in it, really. Yeah. So,
absolutely.
And long may it continue. Okay, so as we getting near the end now, but what would you tell the your 18-year-old self, or anybody aspiring to be executive status like yourself?
So I think probably two things. One is always be learning. I think once you think you know everything, then you're, particularly in the world we talked about, which is so fast moving, then you're dead. So always be learning, always be curious. We talk a lot at High Radius about disruptive thinking and challenge ourselves to how are we going to be disruptive, not just follow a cookie cutter approach.
Yeah. And
so I think that's one, always be learning, and learning from anybody. It doesn't matter who. I've learned plenty of things from my kids. The second one is plan ahead in your career. I talked about outcomes and where do you want to get to, and then plan your career accordingly. I think at times I could have made moves a couple of times which I probably wouldn't have enjoyed, but would have probably been better for my career. And it's probably because I wasn't planning far enough ahead and thinking, actually, where do I want to be in 10 years' time, in 15 years' time? What do I want to be doing? So I would say, I know it's difficult because part of the reason I didn't really know, but I think it's really worth sitting down and thinking about where do you want to get to, and then plotting the path to get there.
Okay.
But for example, I gave you an example on that one, which was my previous company. We had a marketing director, and we had a mentoring program, and I was her mentor, and she'd asked for me. I was running marketing as well as sales and partners, and she'd asked for me to be her mentor. So we went through various discussions, and she was saying, I want to get into sales. So, well, in marketing, this role in marketing for 12 months, you need to prove yourself, and let's look at what that looks like. Why do you want to get into sales? And she said, well, I want to run my own business. And then, through various discussions, we worked it out. And in the end, what we concluded was she wanted to run her own business. So actually, she left the company and started up her own business. And I thought that was a really good way of, she thought she had to go a particular path, but in fact, I got her thinking about was what outcome she wanted. And she got to that outcome. Now, obviously, we lost her from the company, but that's okay. That happens as people move on and grow. And if you can help them get there, then I think that's a big part of our role.
Well, yeah, and that is really what mentoring's about, isn't it? It's encouraging people to be their better selves, at the end of the day, whether it's within the company or to follow their instincts and their heart and go somewhere else. That's exactly. A very important part of it. Okay. And what are your personal hopes and dreams for the future?
I guess, like everybody, some degree of normality resuming at some point next year.
Yes.
Like everybody else, I've realised how much I valued, that sort of human interaction on a regular daily basis, and my job was very varied. It involved going to the office, going to see customers, going to see partners, travelling, and I enjoyed that. So I think it would be good to have that returning at some point next year. Happy, contented, balanced children. Like most people who have children, that's probably the priority, and they're doing pretty well so far. And then I think if I look further ahead, I think I would. I'd like to see England win a football World Cup, and that could be very, very long term.
Well, where are we now? 54 years since the last one, so hang in there.
So that could be very long. And then I think my second long-term goal would be I'd like to get back to the weight I was when I left university. So those two are very ambitious, but that would be what long-term success would look like.
I think there's more chance with the Rugby World Cup before the Football World Cup. Yeah, so
I'm not sure which one's more likely.
Well, I admire your ambitions there, and I think that's a really optimistic, positive, and inspiring place to finish. So, Jon Keating, really, thank you so very much indeed. It's been a real pleasure today.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I enjoyed the discussion.
It was great. Thanks. Looking forward to sharing this with a much wider audience. So thanks a lot, and best wishes for Christmas and the New Year, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
You too. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Esther. Have a good day.
Thank you. Goodbye.